Are RDR characters pure evil or just broken? Let's analyze. Starting with Arthur. The world of Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't black and white, and Arthur Morgan stands as its most compelling testament to moral ambiguity. Far from being a purely evil character, Arthur represents a deeply wounded soul shaped by trauma, circumstance, and a complex moral landscape that challenges simplistic notions of good and bad. Arthur's journey begins in a cycle of violence he didn't choose but was born into. Raised by Dutch van der Linde from a young age, he was molded into the outlaw lifestyle before he could truly understand the consequences of his actions. This wasn't a choice of pure malevolence, but a survival mechanism learned in a brutal, unforgiving world where belonging meant everything. The van der Linde gang became his family, and loyalty was the currency of his existence. What truly separates Arthur from a purely evil character is his capacity for profound self-reflection and moral growth. As the game progresses, particularly after his tuberculosis diagnosis, we witness a transformative journey of redemption. His interactions with characters like John Marston, Mary Linton, and Sister Caroline reveal a sensitive, introspective man buried beneath years of violent survival. He begins to question the gang's philosophy, recognizing the hollowness of Dutch's increasingly destructive leadership. The violence Arthur commits isn't born from a desire to cause pure suffering, but from a complex mix of survival, loyalty, and a warped sense of justice. He kills, but he also protects. He robs, but he also helps those in genuine need. This moral complexity shows a broken man trying to navigate an impossible world, not a monster seeking destruction for its own sake. His eventual redemptive arc, helping innocents, protecting the vulnerable, and ultimately sacrificing himself for others, demonstrates a profound humanity that exists beneath his rough exterior. Arthur's internal struggle is most evident in his journal, where his poetic reflections and artistic sensibilities contrast sharply with his violent exterior. He's a man who appreciates beauty, understands pain, and ultimately seeks a form of redemption that transcends his criminal past. His tuberculosis becomes a metaphorical cleansing, forcing him to confront the life he's lived and make meaningful choices in his final days. By the end of his journey, Arthur Morgan is less a villain and more a tragic hero, a broken man who finds glimpses of redemption in a world designed to crush compassion. He represents the human capacity to change, to recognize one's mistakes, and to fight for something greater than oneself, even when it seems impossible. His story isn't about pure evil, but about the complex process of healing, understanding, and ultimately, human redemption. Next, Micah. Micah Bell isn't just a typical antagonist. He's a distillation of pure, calculated malevolence that goes beyond simple criminality. Unlike Arthur Morgan's complex moral landscape, Micah represents a chilling void of human empathy, a character defined by an almost sociopathic commitment to self-preservation and destruction. His evil isn't born of circumstance or trauma, but of a fundamental brokenness that rejects any form of human connection or moral constraint. From his earliest interactions within the van der Linde gang, Micah demonstrates a unique ability to manipulate and destroy. He's not just a violent man, but a carefully constructed predator who sees human relationships as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. His relationship with Dutch isn't one of loyalty, but of calculated exploitation. He understands Dutch's vulnerabilities perfectly, slowly poisoning his mind and driving a wedge between the gang members with a surgical precision that reveals a deeply intelligent form of malevolence. What sets Micah apart from other criminals is his complete lack of any redemptive qualities. While other gang members show moments of compassion, doubt, or internal struggle, Micah operates with a pure, unfiltered self-interest that knows no boundaries. He betrays without hesitation, kills without remorse, and views human life as nothing more than an obstacle to his personal goals. His violence isn't reactive or survival-based. It's a chosen method of interaction with the world around him. The psychological depth of Micah's evil is most apparent in how he actively destroys the things other characters hold sacred. He doesn't just commit violent acts. He deliberately targets the emotional bonds that keep the gang together. His betrayal isn't just a criminal act, but a calculated destruction of family, trust, and human connection. He understands the gang's vulnerabilities and exploits them with a cold, almost scientific precision that makes him far more terrifying than a simple violent outlaw. Interestingly, Micah's evil isn't dramatically performative. He's not a mustache-twirling villain seeking attention, but a deeply calculating individual who views destruction as a form of personal art. His racism, his casual cruelty, his complete disregard for human life, these aren't just character traits, but a comprehensive worldview that sees other humans as nothing more than objects to be used or eliminated. He represents a form of evil that's far more terrifying because of its calculated nature. Even in his final moments, Micah remains true to his nature. A man who would rather destroy everything around him than accept any form of defeat or vulnerability. He's the antithesis of redemption, a character who serves as a stark reminder that some individuals are simply committed to causing pain and destruction. Dutch van der Linde represents one of the most tragic figures in modern storytelling, a revolutionary idealist whose noble vision progressively disintegrates into madness and self-delusion. His journey isn't simply a descent into villainy, but a profound psychological unraveling that reveals how charismatic leadership can transform into destructive manipulation when unchecked ego and mounting pressure collide. At his core, Dutch began as a genuine visionary. He wasn't just an outlaw, but a philosophical rebel who genuinely believed in challenging societal structures and creating an alternative community for those rejected by mainstream society. His early rhetoric was powerful and seductive, a mixture of progressive idealism, anti-establishment critique, and romantic rebellion. Dutch spoke of freedom, equality, and creating a chosen family that transcended the brutal hierarchies of late 19th century America. This wasn't mere criminal posturing, but a deeply considered worldview that attracted lost souls like Arthur Morgan and John Marston. The tragic irony of Dutch lies in how his most admirable qualities ultimately became the instruments of his own destruction. His charisma, which once united and inspired the gang, gradually became a tool of manipulation. As external pressures mounted and the world became less accommodating to his vision, Dutch began substituting genuine ideology with increasingly desperate rhetoric. His speeches, once filled with genuine revolutionary passion, devolved into paranoid rambling that masked his growing inability to control the gang's trajectory. Unlike Micah's pure malevolence or Arthur's potential for redemption, Dutch represents a more nuanced form of human fragility. His mental deterioration isn't sudden, but a slow, almost imperceptible process where his revolutionary ideals are gradually replaced by narcissistic survival instincts. Each failure, each betrayal, each lost gang member, each missed opportunity, chips away at his foundational belief system, forcing him to construct more elaborate fantasies to maintain his self-image. The relationship with Micah becomes particularly fascinating in this context. Micah isn't just a corrupting influence, but a mirror that reflects Dutch's own growing moral bankruptcy. Where Arthur sees through Micah's manipulation, Dutch becomes increasingly dependent on him. Not because he truly believes in Micah, but because Micah provides a convenient narrative that absolves Dutch of responsibility for the gang's systematic destruction. It's a psychological defense mechanism, a way of avoiding the painful truth of his own failures. Even as his actions become increasingly destructive, he doesn't see himself as a villain, but as a misunderstood hero fighting against an unjust world. This self-delusion becomes his most powerful characteristic, a man so committed to his own narrative that he can justify increasingly horrific actions as necessary for some greater, undefined freedom. His speeches become less about actual liberation and more about maintaining his own fragile sense of identity. The destruction of his relationship with Arthur represents the ultimate manifestation of his psychological breakdown. Arthur, who was essentially Dutch's surrogate son and most loyal follower, becomes the one person capable of seeing through his increasingly hollow rhetoric. Their conflict isn't just personal, but philosophical, a battle between idealistic revolution and pragmatic survival. When Arthur finally confronts Dutch about his moral bankruptcy, it's more than a personal betrayal. It's the complete shattering of a worldview that Dutch had constructed over decades. Dutch isn't simply a villain, but a profoundly broken human being. He's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked idealism, the seductive power of charismatic leadership, and how noble intentions can gradually transform into destructive narcissism. Now Bill Williamson isn't just your average bad guy. He's a walking disaster of toxic masculinity and uncontrolled rage, wrapped up in a package of pure, unfiltered aggression. What's interesting about Bill is that he's not some calculated mastermind. He's more like that unpredictable friend everyone knows is one bad day away from completely losing it. Growing up, Bill was probably the kid who never really fit in. We're talking about someone who found acceptance in the worst possible place, the outlaw lifestyle. The Linde gang became his lifeline, but not in a healthy way. It was more like a dysfunctional family where he could finally feel some sense of belonging. Problem is, Bill's version of belonging meant being the most aggressive, most violent version of himself possible. Unlike Arthur, who struggles with violence but shows moments of genuine humanity, Bill enjoys causing pain. He's not fighting to survive or protect something. He's just straight up mean. His violence isn't strategic, it's emotional and explosive. Think of that guy at the bar who's always looking to start a fight. Except Bill's got guns and zero restraint. His relationship with the gang is telling. Bill's not loyal in the way Arthur or John are. He's loyal out of fear and a desperate need to prove himself. He's constantly trying to show how tough he is, which basically means he's overcompensating for some deep-seated insecurities. Every aggressive action is just a way of screaming, "Look how tough I am," which, ironically, just shows how weak he actually is. The real horror of Bill is how he represents a type of toxic masculinity that's destructive to everyone around him. He's not just violent, he's the kind of guy who takes pleasure in making others feel small. His interactions are all about domination, never about genuine connection. Where Arthur builds relationships, Bill destroys them. Where Dutch inspires, Bill just threatens. By the time we see Bill in Red Dead Redemption 2, he's basically a walking cautionary tale. He's what happens when someone never learns to control their anger, never develops any real empathy, and finds acceptance in the worst possible crowd. His entire existence is about proving how tough he is, even if it means burning everything to the ground in the process. Now, Agent Ross. Agent Edgar Ross isn't your typical bad guy. He's way more dangerous because he does his dirty work with a government badge and a sense of bureaucratic righteousness. This dude represents that special kind of evil that wears a suit and follows legal procedures while basically being a complete sociopath. He's not breaking the law. He's using the law as a weapon to achieve his own twisted agenda. What makes Ross so fascinating is how he operates in this gray area between justice and pure manipulation. He's not some street-level criminal. He's a government agent who sees people as chess pieces to be moved around for his own benefit. His entire approach to law enforcement is about control, not actual justice. He doesn't care about right or wrong. He cares about outcomes that benefit his own career and the system he represents. Take his treatment of John Marston, for example. Ross doesn't just want to catch outlaws. He wants to completely destroy them. He manipulates John by using his family as leverage, forcing him into an impossible situation where he has to hunt down his own former gang members. It's not about justice. It's about breaking a man completely, using the legal system as his personal torture device. He makes John do his dirty work and then throws him away like a used tool. The truly terrifying thing about Ross is how he represents a broader systemic evil. He's not an individual bad guy. He's a symptom of a corrupt system that sees people as disposable. His actions are legal, but they're about as far from moral as you can get. He uses bureaucratic language and official positions to commit what are essentially state-sanctioned murders. Every move is calculated. Every action is about maintaining power and control. Ross doesn't see himself as a villain. In his mind, he's absolutely justified. He believes he's cleaning up the West, removing dangerous elements from society. But his method is essentially state-sponsored terrorism. He manipulates, threatens, and destroys lives under the guise of law enforcement. It's like he's found the perfect loophole, doing evil things while technically following the rules. His relationship with the government is telling. Ross isn't some rogue agent. He's exactly what the system wants. He's efficient, ruthless, and gets results without caring about the human cost. He represents that dark side of bureaucracy, where human lives are reduced to statistics and personal vendettas become official policy. The final confrontation with John Marston shows Ross's true nature. Even after John does everything he asked, Ross still decides to kill him. It's not about justice or law. It's about complete and total control. He wants to prove that he can destroy anyone he wants, whenever he wants, and the system will back him up. And we are done. Let me know in the comments which character you think is pure evil or broken. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, thanks for watching.